on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
What I'm really looking to do is give people a real understanding of this place. I want you to get it, to put food on the table, the luxury to be able to live off so much wild food from the land.
And I wonder if there's anywhere in North America with as rich of a wild food culture as you guys have there.
When I look around at what's out there, this is definitely a book that will stand on its own.
Seal Flipper Supper with Doughboys. Okay, that's not in any other cookbook. I've never seen that.
They salt the capelin and then they bottle it. The more food I can get in cupboard space and out of the freezer, the better. And there's never seems to be enough space.
I'm walking out and this snowshoe hare jumps out 5 feet away from me. God, I wish I had my 22. And then I'm like, wait, and I hit him right in the head with copper 308.
I got a beer bolognese made. I'm going to make some ravioli. I've got some ducks thawing out over there.
It'll be the only cookbook on my shelf with a sock knitting recipe.
It makes it all that much more special because you get the chance to hear everybody else's stories.
Episode 116 of the WildFed podcast, Food, Culture, Place, with Lori McCarthy, is brought to you by Surthrival. Why just survive when you could thrive? Surthrival.com is your source for nature-based nutritional supplements that keep you thriving in the modern world. From hormone health to immune support, increased metabolism to exercise recovery, Surthrival keeps you thriving when others are just surviving. Check out their Pine Pollen Pure Potency for testosterone support, colostrum for a smoothie ingredient that's 3 times more effective against the flu than vaccines, elk antler for powerful growth and recovery, medicinal mushrooms for immunomodulation and powerful antioxidant capability, and vitamin D3 for all the protective properties you've been hearing about during this pandemic. Go to surthrival.com to see the entire lineup and use the coupon code WildFed for 5% off your order. Surthrival. Why just survive when you could thrive? If you still haven't seen season 1 of the WildFed TV show, you can now stream all 10 episodes on demand at myoutdoortv.com. Myoutdoortv.com is Outdoor Channel's premium online subscription service. They host thousands of episodes of hunting and fishing content, making this a great subscription service for anyone interested in the outdoors. But if you just want to see WildFed, grab yourself a free trial subscription and then check out all 10 episodes at no charge. If you decide to keep it, it's just $9.99 a month. We're currently in production for season 2 of WildFed, which is shaping up to be an awesome season of new episodes, and they'll start premiering on the Outdoor Channel in 2022. Hey, thanks again for all your incredible support. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. One of our favorite repeat guests, Lori McCarthy, is back today to talk about her new book, Food, Culture, Place, Stories, Traditions, and Recipes of Newfoundland. Lori is, of course, from Newfoundland, Canada, which, by the way, should not be confused with the rest of Canada, as it really is its own place entirely, having only become a Canadian province in 1949. With a time zone 30 minutes ahead of Eastern Standard, they really do march to the beat of their own drum and speak a dialect all their own. Of all the places I've visited in the U.S. and Canada, nowhere is the food culture still as intimately tied to the landscape as it is there. In fact, I'm very excited for you to see the Newfoundland episode of the WildFed TV show we made with Lori, which is one of the 10 episodes of season 2 that'll start airing on Outdoor Channel this February. Lori's new book, while I'd categorize it as a cookbook, is also a deep dive into the foodways and cultural heritage of the island they call The Rock, which is exemplified in the title Food, Culture, Place. I've seen an advanced copy and it's gorgeous. Definitely a great addition to any wild food or cookbook library. Lori and I have always had a great rapport, so this interview is full of stories, laughs, and of course, interesting anecdotes from the world of wild foods. Oh, one more thing. I spoke with Lori this morning, and there's been some shipping delays that have postponed the official launch of her book, but she'll have them very soon. She wanted me to let you know if you want to pre-order a copy, you can do that on Amazon or by emailing her directly at foodcultureplace.ca. She'll get one out to you as soon as they arrive. In the meantime, enjoy the very unique insights, stories, and of course, accent of the one and only Lori McCarthy. Lori McCarthy, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you again.
Hey, I'm finally getting to take a look at your book. It's unfortunately only a PDF as I await the files, but congratulations for what I can see. It's gorgeous. I love the cover.
Thank you. Yes, the cover, we had done so many very particular sort of shoots to capture the cover picture. And this one was just one of those off photos that was taken that had no intention of making the cover.
Well, the colors are really beautiful, and those are the cloudberries there that I see on the. There's like a
It
plate,
is, yeah.
like a smoked fish. It looks like with
It is.
some greens. What's the fish there?
So that's the smoked salmon.
Yeah.
And then, that's the cloudberry. And the plate is a good friend of mine. She's a beautiful potter here, Alexis Templeton. And the painting was funny. I had taken the painting. This is a piece of Scott McLeod's, a friend of mine in Montreal. I had taken it off the wall and laid it over on the freezer. And Marcia was, moving the plate around like she does and taking photos. And she just happened to lay it on the painting where I was like, oh, I don't lay it on the painting.
Yeah,
she's
right.
Like, yeah, but she's like, yes, look at the color. And anyway, she took this shot and I was like, wow. It was one of those momentary, wow moments with that shot. So
that's funny you say that, because I was looking at the background and it's so pretty. I was thinking, who would set a plate of food on that? But you can see the brush strokes in the painting.
I know. I had that moment.
Yeah, well, it's come out really good. Tell us, give us the big picture overview of what this book is. And, of course, the title, please.
Yeah, so the book is called Food, Culture, and Place. And funny enough, my brother is a graphic designer and tattoo artist and the likes. And I had reached out to him like years ago and said, I need you to take the words food, culture, place and put them on like a beautiful photo for me. And so he did, and he sent it. And I had no real purpose for wanting that. I think it was just, thinking about more and more all the time, like what it is that I do, what it is that's important to me, my work. And those are the words I just took and put on like an image. And then all these years later, it just seemed so fitting that this would be the title of this book. So it's stories and recipes and traditions all sort of wrapped into one book. So the book is, there's almost 100 recipes in it. And we decided to organize it as things come into season, as opposed to, say, spring, summer, fall. Because you've been here, we don't really fit those categories very well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for people listening, you're in Newfoundland, and you guys are even 30 minutes off the time zone. I mean, you guys are like in your own. Like
We
talking
are
about
so
things
special.
not fitting. Yeah, exactly. You guys are short bus special up there. But for real, I mean, to try to do anything the normal way wouldn't even make sense. You guys are dealing with a radically different world up there.
And you've met me. What's normal about me?
Yeah.
So what we did is we took I think I've mentioned to you before for sure, the whole concept of the hungry month of March in Newfoundland, right? So what happens is all the vegetables are cellared here in the ground or into the hills. And so the hungry month of March was a very, it was one of those hard months after all winter, and this is, certainly very traditional, of course, and steeped in our history. But so at a time when, we were certainly more isolated than we are now, all the vegetables would be cellared. And by the time March came, things were getting stored in the cellar, right? And so the hungry month of March is a very common phrase and idea around here. So we thought that we would start the book in April as things started to grow. And so then it's separated into April, May, June, July, August, September. And so we've taken 3 months and sort of whatever grows in that season makes it into that section. But then it's also, like you and I know about, processing food and wild game, and we know how much work goes into foraging and processing, right? And so then what we did is sort of take it and created a lot of the products have a preservation process, so then they can get hauled out, when we're up ice fishing, or so then it shows up again, say in January or February, something that we harvested in October. So say it's October's rabbit hunting season, you get the rabbits, there's like a fresh rabbit liver pate, but then later on in, January, you're showing up with bottled rabbit that's put into a pasta, that kind of thing. So it was hard to sort of continue to keep that theme going. In the beginning, it sounded wonderful. And then we were like, okay, wait a minute. We had all this thing, and it created this really nice flow to it though I think it really reminded us of how we eat here, right?
Yeah.
And it also helped sort of lay out the flow of the book and remind us all the time that everything it's on a cycle, and you can't buy rabbit. So if you don't get rabbit in October or November, you're not getting rabbit.
Right.
So,
Right.
and if you don't do something with the, fresh greens as they grow, whether that's some sort of salt preservation or drying, then you don't have another chance to get them until next year. So I think it certainly reminded us of that.
I remember too going into the supermarket in St. John's, and it wasn't like, I'm in Maine, which a lot of the U.S. considers kind of rural, but we've got Whole Foods in Portland, and all these crazy farmers markets and stuff. But what I saw in the supermarket there, and maybe that's not a great representation of the whole area, but it wasn't that sort of cutting edge, food, that cuisine that you're used to seeing in so many U.S. cities and Canadian cities now. So.
Absolutely. I mean, and you were in St. John's. I mean, if you had got outside the main cities across, or, towns across Newfoundland, it definitely, oh my goodness.
Desert.
I mean, yeah, right. And, people, they really rely a whole lot more on the vegetables that they grow from the garden and fishing and hunting, and because there's lots of places that are hours and hours from a supermarket, and you might have just that small corner store.
Yeah.
So it's the corner stores here always have great stories. Marcia, who wrote the book with me, Marcia loves corner stores because she's like, "Where are you going?" It's like, "Well, I'm going up to Hants Harbor." She's like, "Make sure you find a corner store now," because they're a great place to go. I tell travelers when you come all the time, like, you need to go in there because you'll get everything from a bucket of salt meat to, like, you can still buy nails by the pound. If you need 6 nails, you can go get 6 nails, and then there's the guy in the back room. I just went and bought a new 20 gauge for clay shooting for birds. And, you go up to Heart's Content, and you go in the front, and the wife is at the counter, and she says, here looking for, I heard there's a fella here. I said, knows a thing about a gun. He's like, yeah, in the back, right? So you go in the back, and it's her husband, and he's like, he's sitting in the back, and he's got guns all around him, and there's like, stock and gunpowder, and it's like, oh my God, where am I?
Yeah, and when are you too,
Right? Yeah. No, it's fantastic. It's Tony's super red, right? You go in, and he's got a beautiful collection of guns, and he knows everything about them and how to fit you for the gun. And I was like, oh my God. And he's just in his back room. And anyway, so the corner stores here, it's everything that you need. You could get a ball of yarn. There's always wool. And anyway, it's so interesting. It just speaks of, rural living, which is, charming, I think.
You got a new 20 gauge?
I did.
That's
just
fun.
a little one. It is fun. It's way more fun than the big 12 gauge I got. Because when I started clays, I was like, I'm going to have the shoulder pounded off myself.
You are shooting clays now?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm shooting clays with
good practice for
okay, that is so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really fun. We have a really active rod and gun club here.
Oh, cool!
And so all the old guys have tucked me in under their wing. So it's fun. I'm like the one of maybe 2 girls that shows up there for the regular Wednesday clay shoot.
Yeah, have you got to take those skills out for birds yet?
Not so much, but I can't. It's everyone's having a hard job with birds again this year. And it's. Daniel, it's something that people have been, the hunters and stuff have been saying for a long time now. Like, there's no birds like there used to be. And we've put in those huge power towers across the island, and a lot of the ground has been opened up. And I mean, you can drive right across the middle of barrens now in land that you could never get to before. Uh-huh. And everyone's got a quad now, and they're going in, they're driving the birds deep, and people are going deep in the woods to get the birds. So, I don't have a quad, and I don't know. I kind of enjoy the walk over the barrens, to be honest, but it's not very fruitful for my freezer.
Yeah. Which birds are you talking about?
Mostly ptarmigan.
Yeah. Oh, really? So they're just not in the areas where you used to be able to access them. They've pushed in deeper.
Yeah, they have gone deeper. Yeah, for sure. And that's what that's the word. Although we did push up a covey of 12 of them a few weeks ago. We didn't get a shot at them, but we had the 2 dogs, and I got a new hunting dog, and so she was in the car, and my girlfriend was there. She had her hunting dog, and
kind of dogs running?
So I have an Irish red and white setter, and she's got a griffin.
Okay.
So hers is her griff is 5 or 7 now, around there. Anyway, really good dog. I mean, fascinating to to watch her hunt. And of course, mine is 9 months old now, and she's just a goofball, right? And she's a setter too. So she's always making fun of me. Yeah, well, Lori, what do you expect? You got a setter. But she's a beautiful dog, comes from good Belgium hunting stock. And anyway, so we stopped the car and we hauled the guns out, and then we were like, do we set the dogs out and let it be a learning experience for the pup, or do we just take the birds? Anyway, we went with the dog because she'd never been. Well, yeah, right. As much as I wanted the meat in the freezer, but you know how it is around here. Lots of times I get a call from someone who's, Lori, you're just coming back from central Newfoundland, where apparently it's like land of birds out there. Because every time someone comes back from a hunt, they're like, oh, I got a few extra birds. I'll hang them on your doorknob. I was like, that sounds excellent.
It's funny you say that, because I was reading an interview with you and your co-author of the book. What's her name?
Marcia Tulk.
Yeah. So I was reading an interview with you guys, and I think it was you talking about having a cooler out front of your door where people would come and bring, it's funny because I meet a lot of folks who are just kind of getting into wild game, and they're in the beginning, when you first decide, like, that's what I want to eat, you can get a little desperate for it because it takes a while to figure out how to get it. And I'm reading, so I've seen people doing all manner of things to get it. And I'm just looking at your article, like people are just bringing it to you and putting it into your cooler. It's a pretty unusual setup.
Well, it's totally usual for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I am blessed with people just know that they know I'll eat it, right? That's the big thing here, is that they know if they bring home 7 ducks, the wife's not going to cook them, or the kids are not going to eat them. And you hear that a lot. And, there's a lot of hunters out there who just enjoy to hunt, and they're happy to give away the meat if they know that someone's going to eat it. And, they know I'll appreciate it and I'll do something with it. And then they also know that they'll usually get invited over for a supper. Yeah. So maybe it's more about that.
Because, I know kind of like 2 different ends of the spectrum. You've got the guys who really they just kind of actually just want to hunt, and they don't really want to deal with anything after. It's like, as soon as the animal's on the ground, if they could, they're cracking beers, they're done, And then you got the other people who like hunt, but they almost don't really want to hunt. They just want to get to the butchering part. Right. You know what I mean? And like, they really prefer that part, and the killing part, they're not so into. So anyway, I see how you fit nicely into that little scene for these people.
Right. Perfect way to fill. Yeah.
I want to say, look, going back to your book, I want to just give a little pitch for it, because it's so beautiful. And I know how cookbooks are this thing that for people sometimes are like, oh, do I get another cookbook? But man, I want to share page 33 and 33, 34, 35, Seal Flipper Supper with Doughboys. Okay, that's not in any other cookbook. I've never seen that. The page after that, barley stuffed squid. I'm like, you had me at stuffed squid. This is just some really neat stuff. I think because you guys have food culture and food resources that are a little bit different than I don't see this kind of stuff in cookbooks very often. So you got some really kind of fresh things going on here. I guess they're old in a sense, but really fresh for the culinary world.
Yeah, they are there as old as time, as long as, people have been here in Newfoundland for sure. The, seals that hungry month of March hunt. So much of the book was about trying to keep this food on our table, right? Just like everywhere, food's evolving. A lot of people here are getting away from hunting. And so there's a big push to get the youth more involved, and it's becoming really successful. And when I started teaching, I never thought that there'd be a market for people who want to come and learn game butchery and learn how to rabbit snare. And I was super surprised at it. But there's a mix. There's like the 25-year-old who's just decided that they want to eat different and eat more local, and then there's the people who oftentimes you hear in Newfoundland, it's, well, Dad always hunted, or Mom cleaned them, and we just ate them. Right? We weren't paying attention. And that's what I say, the big thing is how do we make sure that the food stays on the table? And I think that we are going to have to change it a little bit, right? And it's okay to change it. And I say this all the time when it comes to about culture, like culture evolves, right? There's a historic, right? Yeah. Kids in Newfoundland never grew up picking mushrooms. They didn't know what they were. And like I've said before, like as children, we were told everything was poison. Don't eat that, that's poison, right? So And that's how they kept us from eating things that we shouldn't eat. But this generation of kids now certainly, are growing up picking mushrooms and eating mushrooms, and it's becoming part of a very common, place in our diet in the fall of the year. So that's the perfect example of change. And, so it's about cultural food, and yes, it's about evolving the food and looking at it differently, and how, great can we make it? It's not just a subsistence sort of hunt anymore,
Yeah, that's a tough sales pitch for people anyway. I mean,
it is.
Most people are not even capable of living like that, no less have the resources, the time, the space, whatever it is. So how do we bring these traditional things forward is more interesting to me than, I don't know if you have something like this there in Canada, but here in the States, we've got this idea of conservatism where, talking, I guess, more political conservatism, because if you think about real conservatism, I mean, you could say hey, going back to the Stone Age is conservatism in a sense, it's conserve something really old. But there's this type of person here who thinks that everything should be the 50s, the 1950s were the right time, and that's when things were right, And so there's this weird nostalgia about, I don't know how culture was at that time. And it's it's just never going back to that place. So find the things you like from there and figure out how to bring them forward in a way that the young generation will embrace them, because otherwise they're gone,
Right. And, the common, dad will say, well, those were the good old days. I'm really, there was a lot that wasn't good about the good old days, right?
Yeah, right.
But when it comes to food, it's funny because dad will come over, and if I do something, if I take out a backstrap of moose and I'm stuffing it and rolling it and, searing it and glazing it and making mushroom sauce or whatever goes on it, dad is like, I'm not eating that. I don't know what you did to that.
Yeah,
so
right.
There's always the blade roast that goes in the oven with onions and cooks for 4 hours for dad. Right.
Right.
So yeah, he wants it just like it was always to be. Right.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, he'll be the one when I said to dad, years ago, I wanted to learn how to butcher lambs because we grew up on a lamb farm, and I remember dad saying, well, what would you want to do that for? Sure, you can buy it now, right? You can buy good meat now, right? And that was always a sort of interesting point to me because, that he was okay to evolve out of that, right? Because
out of the hard
that was
work
a lot of work. It was the time when you really work to eat,
yeah.
But when it comes to preparation of it, there's a lot of traditionalists still around here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how we've gotten to I guess you and I, our generation, we got to a state of leisure that when you think about the history of the world, humans have been striving to get to this place of leisure for thousands of years, and we finally get to this place where you almost don't have to do anything all day long physically. And
Right.
then we go, I don't like this. And we start to butcher again, and we're going out into the cold and getting wet and dealing with all these conditions because it's not very satisfying to live without any of the work.
Isn't it true? I went up and spent the last week, it's 4 days up in my aunt's cabin, an old cabin in not far from here. Anyway, we grew up there as kids, right? And I hadn't been there in years. And I said, I'm going to go to the cabin. And my aunt Barb said to me, she said, now I got the water shut off out there, And I said, well, that's nothing. I don't mind. She said, but the bucket's out, so you can draw it up out of the well. So, the idea of leaving all this luxury that we now live in and being able to, 5 minutes go and buy cilantro or something, and I go out there and I eat so simply. I bring, I open my freezer and I'll put 2 or 3, whatever cuts of meat I kind of put my hand on. And you go out and you draw water at the well, and there's electricity, but there's no heat except for wood stove, and there's no running water. And, there's something, I don't know. And I'll purposely open the wood stove and cook in on the wood stove, even though the stove is there. It's hard to put into words, I think, what that time really, really does to us. It's certainly something that we do crave, right? I mean, the idea of being detached and being, just off where you have to work a little bit harder for everything. I don't know. I think this has something to do with that, just reminding us of how grateful we do have to be for how we get to live, a lot of us.
But there's also something so toxic about the pace and the technological part of our lives that getting away and like, it's almost like a detox a little bit. You sort of
It
like drain
is.
some of that out. But then I guess if you're detoxing off a drug, usually it's hard because you've got such intense cravings for things and it can be really challenging. But with this, it's like you have a little bit of that, but you also have such good feelings that come up from the satisfaction of what you're now doing that, it's like a little bit easier than I guess, like kicking heroin or something like that. So
Right?
leave
Yeah.
your phone,
It's probably a little
with
bit
your phone
easier,
up.
right?
Yeah, well, I think it is. Yeah. It's
And you
got its
know,
own unique challenges, but
right. Yeah. But when you
yeah.
go to a place where you're forced into those constraints,
Hmm.
I just find it creates like a different kind of headspace, and
Yeah.
certainly it drives creativity. Like I'll take the simplest food, like I said, and I'm sitting there and I think I'm eating this, food, and it's delicious and it's cooked over the fire. And it was, bare bones of what I could put my hands on out there to pick and forage. And yeah, there's something different. I was like, this is so good. Why don't I, just
Mm.
because I don't have to eat like this at home, sometimes there's, well, I could put all this stuff in this. Well, or I could
Fridge
not
full of
just take,
condiments,
right? I just take
Yeah.
the carrots and throw in some, bacon
Yeah.
and onion jam that Marcia had made, and I roasted them off in the wood stove. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah.
Oh, I definitely do. On that topic, I want to talk about the residencies you've been doing. I want to first mention page 88. You've got tailgate limpets and periwinkles, and that's
Yes.
something that you did for us when we visited, and that was really eye opening for me because we had been like on the beach. We gathered these things up, and then you just like flip down your tailgate, and I think you had a little Coleman stove or something, and you just cooked up what we didn't have to bring it home and do all the process. I was just like really impressed with that. So it's cool you have that in the book. But talking about my visit out there and some of the things we did, you were telling me off air that you've stopped doing your kind of like more day trips with people, and now you're doing this more of a residency thing. So tell people about that because it's so fascinating. You
Yeah,
called
I
it like
think,
slow vacation or something. Is that what you
yeah,
said?
it's like a slow vacation.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, it's interesting how much we try to pack into a travel stay sometimes, and, you were here for 7 days, and it was always obviously very purpose driven. We were filming that show, and, but to, really get a feel for this place. And I remember us being in the truck and Dad calling or Mom calling and like just looking at you giggling over on the side of the truck because whether you could understand what they were saying or
Yeah,
not,
well, you put them on
right?
speakerphone, so like, we got to hear it. I've still got a couple of recordings from that I really like.
But it's
Lottie,
right.
how the buys?
So, right. But it was the people that you saw, like all the people that you got to interact with. When you were here, the Larry Hands and Dad and Chris, and so much of this place is about the people. And so the residency now is 3 to 6 days, or I guess really anywhere in between. But so people can come and spend an extended amount of time. So instead of just coming and spend 4 hours with me on the beach doing a very, choreographed kind of afternoon, it's more about let's go and meet this guy and where your interests lie. Because I took an old a guy I work with, Bill Swan from Adventure Canada. I do a lot of work with them, and I took him down to see the guy down from Muse who does he bottles a bunch of wild game, and he's fascinating man. So I said, Bill, we got to go down. I got to go introduce you to him. And just by chance, when we were leaving, he was talking about his vegetables in the garden. Now, Bill's a big soil guy. And we were there for like an hour talking about soil and regenerative soil, like regenerative farming. And it really gave like the time, like 7 days with someone or 4 hours with someone is completely different, right? What you can have people leave with a sense of is very different, right? So I really wanted people to get a larger understanding of this place. And I thought that I could do it. I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years, taking people out, the 2 hour, the 4 hour. But it just feels like, I know you had a great time, but I don't think you get this place. So what I'm really looking to do is give people a real understanding of this place. I want you to get it when you leave, when you leave here. And I want you to get what it takes to put food on the table, the almost like we say that, the luxury to be able to live off so much wild food from the land. those preservation techniques, the bottling the meat, the curing, the salt fish, the wild foraging and stuff. So yeah, we've done a couple of them so far, quite a few so far actually. And, it's very rewarding. It's really nice. You really feel like, you get to connect to this person, and you have time to sort of meet their needs too. If they're interested in soil, or they're interested in fish, or, you really have time to craft their days with them. And, it just became a lot more fulfilling for me, and purpose driven. Right. And for me now, it's about driving that purpose, right, of the work that I do. So yeah.
Plus you get to know the person a little bit more too, right? I mean,
yeah.
It takes hours of talking to somebody to get a real clear sense of who they are, and then to be able to sort of predict what they might be interested in next, versus like you have 1 hour. I can't stand when I go to something and I don't get a personal interaction and they treat me like tourist number 4,520, like, because I'm not that guy, and I can't tolerate being treated like that. I get so little out of that experience. So that makes a lot of sense. So how do people do this with you? Well, go ahead and say what you're going to say, but I want to kind of let people know how they can get involved in that.
Well, I've got a website up, lauriemccarthy.ca, and the Residency is there. So you can pop on that and have a look. People's time here is not scheduled. It's not like these are all the things that we're doing every day. We're going to do all these things, and this is the time. And there's a lot of things that we can do, but throughout their time here, oftentimes what they really are interested in will come up. And then there's you should meet so-and-so, call them up, let's go out picking with Sean Dawson, because he's a, master mushroom hunter, and you'll get so much out of this, and so it's sort of, like you say, and spend enough time with someone so that you can really understand, what it is, where their interests lie, and what will make the best trip for them, right? Yeah. And so people will come and stay. A friend of mine runs a bunch of Airbnbs, so oftentimes people will stay in the Airbnbs, and then we spend our days sort of together. And it's pretty, quite unscripted,
Yeah. Well, I had such a good time when I was up there, so I imagine a lot of similar kind of things. So I
it is.
Give a pretty strong endorsement for folks who can get into Canada. Anyway,
yeah,
a whole nother story. But I'm just, as we're talking, I'm just scrolling through these recipes. I'm so excited about some of this stuff.
Yes.
I think this is a really great book for people into wild game, and you've got a lot of fire cooking in here too, which I like. I'm looking at the fire roasted grouse recipe. We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, hunting is as ancient as humanity itself. And through most of our history, it wasn't just a physical pursuit, but it was also a spiritual one. It was one of the ways human beings came to understand ourselves and how to reverently approach the animals that would come to sustain us. Hunting is still an incredible tool for personal transformation, helping you discover more about yourself, your environment, the animals you share the world with, and even helping you develop a deeper understanding of life and death itself. Hunting can help you find your place in the community of life. But you could hunt all your life and never find that kind of transformation. It takes deliberate practice, awareness, and sometimes even initiation. That's why my friend Monsell Denton created sacredhunting.com. Sacred Hunting brings new or experienced hunters out onto the landscape to stalk, harvest, and field dress animals in a retreat-type setting in conjunction with sweat lodges, plant medicine ceremonies, and strong intention setting that prepares hunters for a lifelong spiritual relationship with themselves, the land, and the animals they hunt. Last time I was in Texas for a hunt, Monsell came out to hold ceremony for me as a way of deepening the experience, creating more reverence for the land, and of course, as a way of honoring the animals we'd be harvesting. That's the piece that's so often missing in modern hunting, a piece that many hunters would like to restore. If this is what you're after or you want to learn more, check out sacredhunting.com. Monsell and his team will guide you through beginner hunts, and more experienced hunters will find unique opportunities available across the country and globe, like axis deer hunts on Molokai in Hawaii, and even a northern Siberia hunt with the Nenets people coming up in 2022. There's only a few spots available for each hunt, so go to sacredhunting.com and complete their 2-minute application. Discounts are available if you let them know you heard about them on the WildFed podcast. Again, go to sacredhunting.com, and you can learn more about Monsell and Sacred Hunting on episode 59 of the WildFed podcast. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, that was a weekend. Marcia and I went over to this place called Sandy Point on the west coast of Newfoundland, where I keep telling you next time you come, we're going to the west coast. And there's a story in there about our weekend over there and all the recipes and food that we cooked. And it was the same thing. We bought so little over there with us. And now it was in August or July we went over there. So we were in, that's our summer season. So it's tons of forage, and we just brought over meat with us almost, and what a great experience. Again, what you can bring out of the limitations. And we literally foraged along the trip over there. But it's called Mind the Gap because there's it's all sand, right? And so it changes all the time. The shape of the island changes, but there's one.
Oh, okay.
There's only
I've seen that
way
headline, Mind the Gap. Okay.
Yeah. So you can only get over to this island at really low tide. So you have to time your trip over because there's a huge sandbar that you go across. And so the locals always say, mind the gap, right? And so, so we bought the quads over and the tents over, and oh my gosh, it was a big trip. It was fantastic. And it's a pretty special place because no one inhabits the island anymore. They did. And it's eerie and beautiful all the same time. Parts of the old church steps are still over there. It's a huge historic site now. There's, it has huge historical significance, and the old grave sites are over there, and the lighthouse is still over there, and you can go in it and even put a well in over there, like a hand pump well.
Wow.
Recently. So it's a very special place for Marcia, especially. And she was like, that's it. I have to take you over there. And it was a great trip.
Man, I wonder if there's anywhere in North America with as rich of a, still a wild food culture as you guys have there. I mean,
I don't know. I've yet to get to Alberta, but there's some great, hunting and fishing up in Alberta, in northern, and I mean a lot of northern Canada is completely uninhabited still, like here.
Yeah.
We've got an interesting landscape here, and we got that Arctic tundra and the boreal forest, and so the landscape really lends itself to quite a variety of. I mean, there are places where certain berries only grow inside a couple of, acres, right? And it's places where flowers and some of the foliage only grows that it don't grow anywhere else on the island.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty interesting place to learn about the land, right? I mean, my journey has been over, since we were a child, we picked from the land, but not the kind of stuff I'm picking now. And it's become such a, over the past 10 years, this foraging thing has become so big that you're able to learn about different landscapes, right? I mean, when you travel, how neat it is to go to someone else's landscape and say, all right, what grows here?
Exactly. Yeah.
What can we pick in this landscape?
And how do you get at it? Yeah.
How do you get at it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do we introduce it to people, and how do you, what do we do with it when we get it? And so it's very fun.
Tell me about your recent moose hunt that you did, because this sounds like it was a really cool and beautiful story for you.
It was really nice. My dad had a license this year, and my dad's up in age now, and he's got the old. So it's a pool system.
Mm-hmm.
Dad had a license this year, and Dad's, I'm going to say 75. He won't listen to this. So, but he's got rheumatoid arthritis pretty bad. And I figured, I said, oh, you know what? I've never gone off hunting with Dad on a moose hunt. And this could very well be, every year could be the last year. Right. So I really wanted to take advantage of that this year. And my brother Bill and I, Bill called and said, we're going the weekend, me and Dad, and, do you want to come? And I was absolutely. So we get in the truck, and it was, of course, early morning, and we went up through farmland. And I mean, we just cleared the gate, no time. I mean, 2 minutes off the road, and a cow and a calf ran out in front of us. And Bill, stop the trucks. And we stopped the truck, and he said it was early too, so they were still rutting, and you could call them in. So Bill started calling for the bull, and no sign. And after half an hour or so, I left and walked down through a couple of fields, and I said, there was no one around, right? I said, now I'm going to practice my moose call after only ever practicing it in the truck.
Nobody can hear you.
Nobody can hear me. Nobody can laugh at me. I'm deep in the woods.
Hopefully a bull.
Exactly. So I like to say I
why
call
don't
the
you
bull out of the woods.
give us an example
Yeah,
of your
you're
call?
right.
So we can what did that sound like?
Yeah,
when you
no,
did
that's
that?
not happening. So I like to say that I call the bull out of the woods, of course, right? So I was calling, and I was like, okay, clearly I'm not very good at this. There's no bull coming. And, I must have been down there for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And I eyed a cow, quite a ways off at the bottom of the meadow. And then the bull comes out. And I was like, oh, my God. So I called my brother. He had his phone on vibrate in his pocket. And he didn't get the phone. And then there was how fast can I get back? I mean, I was probably only, a 10-minute walk. So I started running. And of course, I get to the bottom of the meadow and I can see him and I start flailing frantically, right? And I keep turning around and looking down over the meadow and it's like, oh, he's still there. And anyway, so Bill goes and gets the gun. And him and Dad are coming down over the hill and he's still there. And I take the binoculars for my brother and he and I creep out and Dad, we creep out onto and I'm poking my head up right every now and then with the binoculars and I can see and we're down low. And then I see him. It was obvious that the cow and the cat and the bull heard us or they didn't get a whiff of us because we were downwind. And, but they knew something was up and I was like, oh, that's it. We're going to lose him. Anyway, we lay down for a minute. And then I said to Bill, I was like, we're going to creep along on our guts, right? So we creeped along and we get out and the ridge and there he is. Sure enough, he's still there. And so one shot was taken and the boys heard it hit the moose and I didn't hear it. I was just, adrenaline was rushing.
Oh, yeah.
And oh my God, yes. And I was like,
they got that whap sound.
Oh my God, yes, I totally missed the sound. And then he started to run. Well, he stopped for a second and then he started to walk into the woods and I was like, oh, that's it. He's gone. We missed it. And he turned broadside and I said, put another one in him. And he put another one in him and he walked about 100 feet and I said, oh, there he goes in the woods again. And he turned around and he walked straight back right where we hit him and he just collapsed.
Wow.
And it was, oh my God, it was so exciting. Yeah. So that's the first time I had been there for the whole thing, like the stalk, the hunt, the paunching of the moose. And then my other brother showed up and my sister-in-law's brother showed up and it was just like a gang of people all showed up and inside an hour and there was like 5 or 6 of us there and we just broke the animal down and put it in my nice white truck. And it was new and I was like, oh, that's it. She's broken now. The first moose is in the back of her.
You guys broke. So I was going to ask you because moving a moose, as you know, is not an easy thing. So I see different things done in different places, but you guys broke it down into quarters and then packed it onto the truck.
Yeah, and that's traditional here. Like it gets punched right away, and the hide's left on just to keep the meat clean, and then it's put up in the back of the truck and then taken.
Oh, really? So you'll take the quarters off with the hide on?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, cool. I know, and like
nice little package that it's in.
It'll all packaged up, yeah. I mean, it holds the heat in is the only problem.
Downside, yeah, but you get the most of that heat's right in the ball socket joints and
and once the gut gets out, and it was a really nice cold. It was a cool morning. It was probably only 2 or 3 degrees, so it was good. But we had a big warm spell after that, and the boys here actually stopped hunting because, I mean, we were lucky. There was nowhere from where we were to get the moose out. But I mean, if you take a moose down deep in the woods, I mean, you could be hours and hours getting it out and you don't want to be taking a moose out in 10, 12 degree temperatures, right?
Right.
So, but it's all cooled off again now and everyone's back hunting and it's been a good year. Lots of people got their moose this year. And of course that meat gets all distributed out depending on how many people are in the hunting party, right?
Yeah.
But it's like 1,200 pound animals. So a lot of meat to go around.
Oh, it's so exciting, man. That's really cool.
Yeah,
wow.
It is.
Yeah. I shot a deer the other day. I've been hunting on my own property, which has been really exciting because, traveling to get the food can be, and there's like less and less places we can hunt. So anyway, I've got this 31 acres here and I've got a bog on it. And when you're sitting out there, I've got some tree stands out. You're sitting out there, you could almost imagine you're like way up in northern Maine. It looks like it, but then it's the sounds around, of stuff going on. Like the other day, I'm in my stand. It's the last day of hunting season. and it's like we call it the killing hour. It's like right down, where it's the last light, and all of a sudden the loudest hip hop music, like
Oh.
so loud, and like the real new stuff that's like real grating on the ears. I don't know what it was, Post Malone or something. Anyway, it's just blasting through this bowl that I'm overlooking, and I'm just like, oh gosh, it's the last day. Nothing's coming in. But I had shot a deer. I had 2 tags this year. I shot a deer a couple days before, and I hit it pretty bad. It's a long story, but when things got real messy, and it bled into, as a doe, it sort of like bled down into the space between her udder and her paunch. So like,
Wow.
it wasn't gut hit, but the blood was all like, and in the thighs, but under the skin and fascia, like really strange. So it made it really hard to see what was what while I was trying to gut her.
Yeah.
And, man, I was awful, actually. I felt so stupid. But anyway, I get cutting in there, and I hit the udder just right, and milk and blood just start pouring out on my floor. As this like pink, like it looked like Nestle Quick, that pink stuff that makes the milk.
Yes.
And my dog went crazy for it.
Berserk.
And she drank every drop of it,
So now
really
when would that, when would those, what's the season there for deer having their babes?
In the spring, they drop their fawns, but she still must have had yearlings with her from the springtime, because
From the spring,
she was
right.
still real milky. Yeah. And fat, so much fat. Yeah. I mean, she was just, that's an interesting thing. I harvested a bison this year, and
yes,
I did
seen.
well, that was a pretty cool experience, but I went pretty deep into looking at what were the bison that Plains people were selecting, and it's like pregnant females because they had the most fat, and or lactating females because they had a lot of body fat in order to sustain that lactation. And anyway, this doe, just really cool to see the amount of fat that she had, which I don't really eat much of the deer fat, but my dog does, so it's lots of calories.
We don't have deer in Newfoundland, as you know, and I always wondered about the deer fat. My cousin's
Waxy.
Yeah. So is there really nothing that can be done with it?
Well, what's neat? So I've got a friend down the road who does this from time to time, and then actually at my friend Arthur's Wild Food Thanksgiving this year, they did it as well, where they did the ribs and like a long slow roast on them.
Yeah.
And when the ribs come out hot, like deer ribs, sort of smoked, barbecued, whatever, coming out hot, they're amazing. As soon as they start, because you can't tell the fat when it's hot, it just tastes like fat. So you're just like, oh God, this is so good. And you're just tearing it apart off the bone. But if they start cooling off, what happens is that wax starts to harden on your teeth, like you're chewing on candles,
Wow.
So it doesn't taste bad, and it digests okay. It's just a matter of like, you've got to have it hot enough that you don't notice that it's waxy, like tallow. Versus like you've got that bear, right? This year you got a bear in the spring, like that fat is like pure liquid gold. It's just, it doesn't have any waxiness, nothing like what a cow fat, like a deer fat's like cow fat, that waxiness.
Right. Yeah, beer fat. I'm hoping that I can still get a beer for the fall, because there wasn't enough fat on the spring beer to do anything with. And after watching what you did with beer for the fall, I was like, I just vision jars of beer fat now, and I need it. I need to get the beer so I could get the fall fat on it.
It's so interesting what people do with it too. I brought some out to Standing Rock. They use it in ceremony. So for them, it was like, they're just so stoked to get some. I met a woman recently who's got a really bad case. I want to say psoriasis or eczema. I'm not sure. But anyway, for her, bear fat is the most soothing thing for her skin. So, get to give her a bottle and just see her light up from it. Or recently, my wife was like, because she's kind of not that, Ivani's not that into bear fat. Like she prefers olive oil. But but man, she started putting it in her hair and was like, okay, I'm sold.
Wow.
Like volumizing her hair and stuff. Wow. So it's just got all these neat applications. But so your bear season goes on a bit longer. You still got a chance of
we do. Yeah. Bear season stays open right into the winter here. So it's there's still hope. And, again, I'm not planning a bear hunt myself, and I didn't get a license this year. But several buddies of mine do, and it will either be
out front.
Right. I'll leave the cooler out. I'll need a big cooler, because I was gifted a whole beer this spring, and because he said, I can't take it home. My wife won't eat it, and she won't let me in the house if she knows I went.
What have you
So
found with the meat? Like, because you were saying to me that in Newfoundland, the idea of eating bear is kind of a turnoff to most people.
it is, and I ask people all the time, and there's 1 in 20 people will say they had it and they like it. And then there's most people will say, well, I had it once and I didn't like it. But like it's just the most bothersome thing, isn't it? You hear that I had
Well,
it
and
once
also
and I
imagine if
don't
you were
like
like,
it.
I tried beer once, I didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the first time you taste beer, you're like, that's disgusting.
Right.
But then after 20, 30 times, you look and people sure seem to like it after that too.
Right.
So
But there wasn't even that for me. Like I've fed it to the kids and they just thought it was pork ribs.
you wouldn't even
Like
know.
this,
You wouldn't even
they
know.
wouldn't even know. And I fed it to the neighbors' kids. They just thought and I didn't dare tell them because I didn't want to start that before they ate. Right. But I'll tell them after then.
Yeah.
It's like, you
Yeah,
know
of
what you just
course.
ate, Yeah, because it's beer. And then they might never eat it again. But or
Very
worse, they'll go home
mild.
and tell their parents that I fed it to
Right.
them.
Right. They're never allowed over again. Very mild meat. I mean,
It is,
one of
right?
the
I
most
think
mild.
And I think it is what happens with, especially with seal here too. And I mean, that the handling techniques are so different, Daniel, right? Like,
Hmm.
one time the boys would throw a moose in the truck and it could be in their, whatever the situation was. And we didn't have, so many of these butchers now, they all got these big walk-in coolers and the meat is hanging for a longer period of time in the proper temperatures. And we have better handling techniques now. And even, ponching it. And so every step of the way I feel is improved.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's leading to, and that was what led to that sort of disdain for some of the wild meats. It's just the handling
Mhm.
of it and the age of it and the cooking. So we sort of fell down along the way in a lot of parts. And
And you
that again,
mentioned with the moose, like when the guts are in, that's all that heat's in there with all that
mm,
bacteria and all that. But
right?
like a bear is so much more insulated. You
Mm,
know what I mean? Because it's got that thick layer of fat. It's got that huge round beer belly. It's got all that
right.
thick hair. Like, and there sort of seems to be universally people understand, like they knock down an ungulate and they're like want to gut it right away, but they kill a
Right.
bear and they for some reason don't gut it right away. And I think that's
Oh,
one of the big
really?
mistakes made. Yeah, because the tendency is to want to weigh the bear guts in.
Oh,
So,
okay.
like there's a whole thing, at least here, where it's like, what's your
Oh,
deer weigh? They mean hanging weight.
oh,
What's your
right.
moose weigh? It's guts out. What's your bear weigh? It's guts in. So,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, like it's just a different culture because it's more like, I think people approach it more like predator hunting, like most people who hunt coyotes or wolves or foxes, they're not eating them. They're after the
Right.
hides or whatever, the skulls. But,
Hmm.
so I think people approach bear like that and typically deer and moose as food, caribou or whatever it is. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of
And
the things.
there's no real trophy hunt here. I mean, people come in from outside the province and trophy hunt, but yes, now if a fella knocks down, 12-point bull, you're going to hear about it, right?
Everyone's going to be hearing about it.
Everyone's going to hear about it. Yeah. But we won't not take an animal that's in front of
Right.
us
I
because
love
it
that.
is really about the meat for everyone here,
Hmm.
and like you say, and how great it is when you actually have it to give it to someone who didn't get their moose or give it to an older person. Oftentimes you always make sure that the older people that your neighbor, he's not hunting anymore. And then, it's our job to kind of pass on the meat to him now because you know what? He spent, 50 years hunting and he gave his meat away too when someone needed it or wanted it and never had their moose. And so it's kind of there's a lot of that tradition that really sits in your soul, I think, in terms of your place in these hunts here.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said about the old guys up at the Rod and Gun Club that I shoot clays with now. I mean, just to be around that to have that mentorship, to have that the carrying on the torment now that goes along with it, right? As the Newfoundlander, but it's so important. Oh, it's so comforting that that someone is so interested in you succeeding and you
Yeah.
hitting those clays or you hitting those birds. That we're really fortunate here that if you just give yourself for new hunters, like it's always difficult to break into that. It's so intimidating,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
so intimidating, especially as a female and just someone who really lots of people just never grew up around it, but they want to do it. So, I mean, we're very fortunate. Like I said, we have a huge number of people here at the Rod and Gun Club. And I mean, everything from the youth groups to, it's just really nice to see like it reviving itself or staying alive,
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad to hear too, like that, because in the lack of the trophy ethos, you're a lot more free to learn because, if you want to get big, huge bucks every year, if that's your obsession, that takes years to learn how to do that. If you're not into that, it's like, who cares, But the challenge is here, you've got the anti-hunting people who are mad at you for hunting, and then you've got the trophy hunting people who are mad at you for not going after the biggest, baddest thing that you can find, and you sort of feel like stuck in the middle as a meat hunter. So I appreciate that. I wanted to, on the topic of new hunters too, I got a buddy who's been struggling for a couple years to get a deer out here, and each year he gets a little closer and a little closer, and this year he hit a deer and bumped it going out. He got about 20 yards up to it, thought it was dead, bumped it, ended up losing it. I went to help him track it, and we couldn't find it. And I mean, the amount of blood, you're like, we both knew the deer died somewhere, but we couldn't find it. Anyway, we tried quite a bit, and he was just feeling gutted. He's just feeling so bad. And anyway, a couple days ago, I'm coming out of my tree stand, and I'm carrying a .308 rifle, but I shoot these copper bullets, and I've spent a lot of time really coming to understand the ballistics of them. And they're neat because they're monolithic. They don't expand or break apart like a lead bullet. So anyway, I'm walking out, and I'm kind of heading back to my house, and this snowshoe hare jumps out, and I mean, he just stops, and how it freezes like they'll do, but he's like 5 feet away from me. And I'm thinking like, oh, I'd like to have him for dinner tonight. And then I'm thinking, God, I wish I had my 22. And then I'm like, wait, I got that copper bullet. I know it's not going to do too much. I aim about an inch over his head because I know that, I got to compensate for how close I am. And I hit him right in the head with that copper .308, right?
Nice.
And it's perfect. So I grab him up and I bring him back. And when I skin him, I realize his whole backside's been bit up. He's got all these punctures, and there's all this pus under the skin. Like I couldn't eat him. Like he was all infected. And
well, I'm glad you took him out of his misery.
I did eat his shoulders, to be honest. But anyway, but I saw that, and I was thinking to myself, like, it's interesting how also predators will sometimes wound something and not be able to recover it, And I want, just like as a message to my buddy or to new hunters, like it's kind of, I understand why he feels bad about it, but it's like, hey, man, that happened to a coyote the other day with this rabbit, and like that just happens. Well, there you go.
It is interesting to think about, right? I mean, I think we put ourselves at the top of this food chain, but we're really not. We're just really part of it in a certain sense like that, right? And, I always enjoy that, that thought process around that, right? Like we're just a part of it. If we're, if you look at, like you say, a cheetah or whatever animal that goes after that animal, it misses, it bites its back up, and then it all just,
gets away.
It's that circular, right? It's that circular economy, that circular food that's, it's very interesting to watch how,
You've got a wild dinner coming up, wild food dinner?
I do, tomorrow, Saturday night. Yeah. So we sold off some fun dinners for the book. So people bought them out, and now we're going to do a dinner. I got a beer bolognese made. I'm going to make some ravioli. Cool. Yeah. Wow, I've got some ducks thawing out over there, some feathered creatures, trying to keep the dog off them.
Those are sea ducks?
These are black ducks, actually.
Oh, nice.
So, and I do have some seabirds. I got some turs there. I was out with Larry last week on a goose hunt. Larry, who you went out fishing with when you were here.
Yeah. I can't wait for people to see him. By the way, that episode we'll start airing in late February, I think, this year.
Oh, nice.
That'll come out this year.
Yeah, so Larry calls and he says he's going out goose hunt. Now, the geese haven't been very plentiful this year either. And I have not been out with Larry. Now, Larry is 73, right? And I started working out like 2 years ago, like every day almost, right? I was like, that's it. I got, get my act together so I can get out over the barrens and archery and all this stuff. So anyway, Larry picks me up in the dark, and I meet him on the highway in the dark, and I'm trying to keep up with him. Like we land out in the barrens and the Witless Bay. There's like no trees anywhere. It's complete barren land. It's that like tundra landscape. it's dark. And the man like jumps out of the truck and just grabs his gun. And I'm out there like packing up my bag, got my like first aid kit, got my head lamps and, and my snack and my water. And Larry's like, what are you doing? I was like, just need a sec. And he stood there, like he literally opens the truck door, grabs the gun and gone. And I spend an hour like trying to keep up with him over to Barron's. And oh my God, I was so embarrassed. I was like, I'm going to die trying to keep up with this man because I am not going to tell him I'm tired. And, he's like, he has this internal compass of going to, I'm sure this is it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just fast. And we get in, you got to stay down. These birds are intelligent, right? He'd walk, 500 feet or something, and 100 feet, he'd stop and I'd get another little tidbit of information, right? And they'd put the head down and go again, right? He'd be waiting for me to catch up to him to tell me the story about this rock and the last birds he had on this hunt. Oh my God. And we get in there. And anyway, we almost got at, there must have been about 6 of them. And then we heard him go to wing just around the corner. And that was it then. Oh my God, I had listened to that all the way back. All the things we should have did. And, these birds are very intelligent, Lord. They knew when we were there and we should have got in earlier. And
yeah, I got a buddy just like that who's like, he'll be like, you know what? I know that bear that we saw. I remember that bear from 6 years ago. And I saw him up to, whoever's place. And it's just like, I think he might be right a lot of the time. But also that generation, I try to remind myself, like if you got on the internet with him, he probably can't navigate. He probably doesn't have a good sense of direction on the internet, or, you know what I mean? Like we're adapted to certain environments that generation isn't. But when you get out there with them, it's like they don't get dehydrated. Do you notice that? It's like
they never drink anything.
They don't drink water. It's like, you go on one of these long walks, you get back, you're drinking off your water bottle the whole time, chugging when you get back to the car. You're like, all he's had is that coffee this morning. Like, how's he? Right. And he's just going to have a drink later on. Like, how's he doing that? They're impervious to a lot of things where I feel like so soft in that way. And like you said, I'm going to make sure I have my headlamp, and do I have my GPS, and do I have all,
and
I got snacks so I can stay, I need my nutrition for later.
We're so weak, Daniel.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy, right?
We're so
But at least we have the next generation coming. They're even weaker, so we don't have to feel we're going to look real tough. So that's it.
Yeah, yes, I, got the GPS and I'm trying to map out where we are. Of course, I have no service. And of course, it's Newfoundland. And they're like, you don't need service. You have Larry. As long as you keep up with him, you're good. Because he has this internal compass going.
Yeah, he knows that rock. And from every
side. God. Well,
yeah.
What a pleasure, though. Again, like those moments where you get to spend time with those people. And, the reason some of that stuff ended up in this book is because Larry dropped it off,
Yeah.
And he wants me to cook it and have him over because he wants to eat it differently than he always ate it before. Like he always enjoys that too, He loves the traditional, but and there's a lot of people like that now. And so that's what this dinner will be. And it'll be just different food that people may have never tasted or eaten before, done in a way that they just might not have tasted, So and that's the purpose. That was the purpose of the book. It's like, how many times can we sort of taste this and try it and move it and change it and add it to, whatever, and see what we can make and make it delicious. Right. And Marcia's comes from the west coast of Newfoundland, like I said. And then it's all her stories from being over there and the traditions. I find so interesting in like the bottling and the preservation techniques, because there was, most of the island was not accessible by vehicle, right? And so it was only just accessible by boat. And so what's really interesting is, as I was going around collecting, stories over the years, is that a lot of the traditions didn't go from community to community, even if it's like a 10-minute drive now, right? Because it could have taken 4 hours in the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like peninsulas and islands, and then there's all the islands off the islands that are still inhabited. Some of those very particular traditions around how it was something was bottled and taken care of and salted, and you just never hear of it before. Like when we made the capelin run here, right? When you were here, we seen the capelin roll. Remember down in Middle Cove, and
of course.
And they're such a traditional fish. But when Marcia was over on the West Coast, and she's got the story in there how they salt the capelin for, I think it's just like 4 hours, and they take it out, and then they dry cure it and smoke it, and then they bottle it so it don't take up room in the freezer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was like, that's fascinating, because the more food I can get in cupboard space and out of the freezer, the better. Right.
I'm terrible
So
about
anyway,
that. I just keep buying more freezers. I need to start
well,
doing more.
right. I have 3 big freezers, and there's never seems to be enough space.
I just got my 4th one. So bad.
Well, you're like a classic Newfoundlander. Like, what's the problem? You just buy more freezers.
Yeah. That's what I keep doing. I was like on the way home with that bison, like, we're probably gonna need another freezer.
Right.
But so their way of dealing with capelin though is different than how you guys have done it. That's really neat.
We never put it in bottles, which makes sense. I mean, once it's dried, it's it's preserved to say, but to bottle it then is interesting. And then they got the bottles up at the cabin then, right? So there's always bottled food up in the cabin, so you never have to drag in food.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of cool like technique stuff in here and good stories too, man. I'm excited. So when do I get a physical copy? Because it seems like you might have published at the most inopportune shipping moment in human history.
Yeah.
Modern history anyway.
Right. But yes. So we hope to have it in people's hands by January at this point.
Okay, cool.
So so you'll get it. Don't worry. I'll get that up. Get your book.
Wait. Yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, it's really nice. The photography, who did this?
So Marcia did all the photography. So I was approached to write a book like several times over the years. And I thought to myself, it's I need the right person to write a book with. First of all, I'm not that organized. And Marcia is like organized. So I'm like, I need somebody organized. And I also, more importantly, I wanted to have beautiful photography. And so her photography was just spectacular. And, I'd learned so much about how she makes it look so beautiful, which was a very fun process for me too. Most of the time I would
pick up a little bit of that.
Well, I don't know. I definitely, it's interesting, right? We could have the same camera and she'll take 200 photos and, 150 of them are beautiful. Now to me, and to her, there's like 3, but it's just how there's something about an eye, like it's a true art to be able to capture, to capture that moment with an eye, like that creative eye that she has. Anyway, it was just fantastic.
That's
so
cool.
It was a pleasure to work with her. Yeah. And, it was a fairly daunting task because we had set that to be done in a year, right? And so we had to write this book in a year. And it wasn't, it was great that we already had so many stories. And Marcia had an enormous collection of her grandfather's photos that were all negatives. He used to do them in his own dark room. And so a lot of the photos are her photos. And so
because there's a lot of like vintage old black and white photos and stuff like that.
So it really sets the tone of the book, I think, from that story of the past and the present and kind of the future, what food can be. And so that was really it really changed how the book ended up, which was absolutely a pleasure really to work through the process.
It'll be the only cookbook on my shelf with a sock knitting recipe. I got a cod jig motif even.
Right? I know. Well, Marcia socks, she knits them. I've got like 5 pairs. Every time she knits me a pair for someone who wants a pair, my mother or my cousin or something, I'm like, oh no, I really like those ones. And so I end up having an enormous amount of them.
Awesome.
So, people mostly call slippers, but here you also call them vamps, right?
Oh, I was wondering. I was looking at that. Like
they're vamps.
Like, what are we talking about?
Right. So they're a bit short for vamp. Lots of times vamps come up to your knee or somewhere in between. But again, it all depends on where you are, right? So you can knit yourself a pair of socks now over a pair of vamps over the winter. And it just speaks to this place and the the culture here. And so there'll be many vamps knit over the winter here.
I bet. I'm just saying, put me on the list.
Just put you on the list. Says pair of vamps.
And I wanted to tell you, we had a professor of archaeology on the show the other day talking about the Pleistocene epoch and the first peopling of North America. And at one point we were talking about the glaciation, 15,000 years ago. And he said Newfoundland. And I said, excuse me? I was like, whoa, we need to stop right there because it's Newfoundland. All right. Hey, before we hop off today, I want to just get a sense of what's going on with the TV show you shot. And when are we going to be able to see that?
Yeah, so that is, it's still in post-production. It should go to air what are we? It should be to air by now, but it will definitely be out in this month. So that's very exciting. Yeah,
awesome.
and we're already working on a second season.
Congratulations!
So, yeah, so
big deal.
We hope that we get it. I've got, we all have plans. You know how it is. You make the plans, right, and move ahead as if they're going ahead.
Yeah.
Right.
They seem to be. I mean, since I've known you, it's been. I know I said this last time you were on, but it's just been a true pleasure to watch the exponential reach and growth of your work. It's so well. It's so deserved. Yeah. Where does this book fit into the literature, the food literature for Newfoundland? Are there a lot of traditional cookbooks, and how does this kind of fit with what's out there right now?
So I don't, when I look around at what's out there, this is definitely a book that will stand on its own in terms of sort of the new, I hate to call it like the new twist on it, but just sort of a real exploration of parts of the animals that had never been dealt with before, or curing techniques that people might not have heard of before. And there's lots of books out here in Newfoundland about, with lots of old stories in them, which is always a pleasure because it really, again, like just sets the tone, right? Lots of old cookbooks out, lots of traditional ones here, lots of everyday meals here, and, cooking with all this, with fish and all the stuff from here. But I think this one will definitely, it'll have its own corner in a bookshelf for sure. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see the chefs in the area get a hold of it too, and how it might impact some of the culinary culture out there as well.
Well, it's hopefully it'll inspire people, and they'll enjoy cooking, and they'll enjoy reading the stories. And mostly we find as soon as we got a couple of authors' proofs, we drag them around with us. And soon as what's really beautiful is when they open it and they see a picture, and then out comes the story, and that has to be the most rewarding moment, like, whether it's capelin, like, then they stop and there's a whole big story about the capelin. Then there you hit squid and you're like, my grandfather was squidding and I remember the time. And so it's such a nice moment. It's such, moment after moment of time and place and kind of, so yeah, it makes it all that much more special because you get the chance to hear everybody else's stories. So
yeah, that's,
yeah.
Your collection of stories making it to the surface now too, which is really cool. So yeah, Lori, I'm just I'm really impressed with what you've done, and as I said, as a friend, I'm just so happy for you. So congratulations, and thanks for coming back on the show.
It was a pleasure as always. You take care.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. Help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 of the WildFed TV show, you can go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 10 episodes. Season 2 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2022. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.